right before we hit the tree, I heard him scream my name.
The devastation of something like this doesn't end the week of the funeral.
Seeing your family hurt, seeing anybody's family hurt, it's going to take the biggest toll in your life that you can think of.
I got up and I just thought my brother was sleeping on the couch. I didn't know he was dead.
And all I could hear was blood-curdling screams.
The worst case scenario can come true just by one mistake.
I knew, I was pretty much informed that there was going to be prison time. I thought these sort of things don't happen to people like me, and I wasn't really worried about the consequences. I was too busy partying all the time. On the night of April 11, 2006, I was out drinking with some of my friends. We were fishing, we were just kind of partying and looking for some place to go later on. We went and picked up the alcohol and then drank at what I guess was a vacant lot. Me and my friend just got in my car, and I can't really remember getting on the highway. I remember just slightly right before we hit the tree, I heard him scream my name. And I picked him up and I shook him and I started screaming his name and just kept shaking him, and he wasn't responding to me. My next memory after that was being cut from the car.
I was talking with my mother on the phone. The operator interrupted, said that I had an emergency call. Someone from Morristown Memorial Hospital told me that my daughter was in a car accident.
To this day, my mom still tells me that how when she walked in the emergency room, how she didn't understand why the officers were looking at her like that.
And the one man said, "Your daughter's fine, but you killed her best friend." And at that point, my knees just got weak. They brought me into her. There was a nurse there who was just glared at me. And I couldn't understand. And then when my daughter opened her mouth, the smell of wine and cheap liquor could have knocked me over.
I think my mom was really embarrassed.
And I said to her, what is going on? What happened? And she just started screaming, "Get out of here. I don't want to see you."
I didn't want any help. I wanted answers, and that's all that I was looking for.
The policeman went in and evidently told Eavan what they told me, that she had killed Lou. And all I could hear was blood-curdling screams.
I felt like I should have been the one to die. I was the one that made the decision to drive, and that he should have lived, And he had so much more to live for, and I felt like I was a failure, and I just hated me.
My brother, Matt, is 3 years older than me. Great kid, loves to play sports, hang out with friends, always looking for a good time. He died unexpectedly May 3rd of 2010. My mom and I found him on our couch, not breathing. I got up and I just thought my brother was sleeping on the couch. I didn't know he was dead. He, from what I've heard and have been told from the investigation, he, after work he met up with two friends. Then they drove to Staten Island, where they picked up an amount of Oxycontin. My brother was pulled over in the Chili's parking lot, and my brother got nervous for having an amount of Oxycontin pills, and he swallowed all of them. A friend of his drove his car home because he told my mom that he's been drinking. My mom wasn't happy about it, but she helped him into the house because he was stumbling. So she put him on the couch where she could hear if there was any issues, and put him with a bucket, and then he aspirated through his mouth and nose, and that's when we found him the next morning.
The events on what Erin experienced that morning and her mom experienced is incredibly tragic, and knowing that their heartbreaking story is also repeated time and time after again, because more people, again, abuse prescription drugs, in particular Oxycontin, more than anyone else in the United States, is that drug. And her story is powerful. There's another story every single day.
Police say the car was hit by a freight train, but the driver wasn't crossing the tracks. He had been driving between them.
Basically what was happening was a get-together between a few friends. And the girl that I was with, she got intoxicated. She started throwing up on herself. I felt responsible to take care of her. I was drinking myself, so I was a little intoxicated as well. And I really don't remember leaving the house. I felt like the road was a little bumpy, the car was moving. I looked forward and I realized it was a train tracks.
Police say this drunk driver had actually made it 1.5 miles down the tracks, driving on the gravel between the railroad ties.
My car became disabled.
And that's when the freight train came from this direction.
So I started turning on the car, turning on and off the car, so I could get it just a little bit. Try to get it out the way from the middle of the tracks. I literally got out 1 second before the train hit. The bail was $100,000. The punishment for aggravated assault would be 10 years in state prison. Yeah.
July of 2005, we got that, the phone call you don't want to receive. My daughter left the house in the evening and there was a firework display in town. And after the fireworks, she was walking back to her car and was hit and killed by an impaired driver. There's too many people in our prisons who, unfortunately, it ended up in a tragedy. These are teachers, these are people from all walks of life. They're not evil people, but they're serving time, and their lives, just like mine and other victims, their lives will never be the same. They're changed.
I had just turned 20 when I was sentenced, and I was terrified going down to prison. I was taken in a police car, I was shackled, I was cuffed. You walk in, the first thing they do, they put you in a cell, leave you there for a little while, and then they'll bring you out. You have to have a full strip search, and you're completely bare naked, and bend over at the waist, squat and cough, and just completely humiliated.
I can't tell you how many times I went down there to see her, and I couldn't believe it. She was in with violent criminals, murderers, gang members, robbers, people who killed their children. I cried all the way home. It was just an awful thing, just to leave her there.
The devastation of something like this doesn't end the week of the funeral. There are days, events, holidays, birthdays, when it's worse than other days. But everybody in the family is, I don't know how else to put it other than, lives have changed in a lot of different ways.
The biggest effect now is that I'm an only child, and the fact that I have no one really to talk to.
Seeing your family hurt, seeing anybody's family hurt, is going to take the biggest toll on your life that you can think of. See my little brother, I'm his idol, so seeing him view me a different way, it really does hurt me a lot.
The worst case scenario can come true just by one mistake. These are not bad kids. They're normal, everyday kids. They could be your neighbor, the boy or girl next door, who, because they made one bad choice, their lives are ruined. And they'll have to live with this forever.
Every day I wake up and I remember him, and little things trigger thoughts, different songs on the radio. Thanksgiving comes around, I'm not even worried about missing my mom, I'm worried about his mom and how she's sitting alone at dinner, and I took that from her, and I took that from his little brother and sister.
When I see the pain Eavan is still living with, it hurts me too, because she no matter what she does, she can't change this.
What happens if one day, I decide to get married? How can I even go through with that, thinking that I took that away from him? Or, graduate from college maybe one day, hopefully, he'll never get that chance. And I took that from him. He's always going to be there and always a memory of him and constantly the thoughts of the guilt. And, I don't think there's any way to fully forgive yourself. All you can do is just keep giving back in some way. And it makes it a little bit easier to hopefully help somebody else from making the same decision that I made that night.
It just takes one mistake to ruin your life. It takes one mistake to jeopardize somebody else's life, your family.
Everyone's life is worth something. Don't throw it away. Don't throw it away on a stupid, fun decision, spur of the moment, spontaneous, whatever you want to call it. Don't throw it away on that, because you could be like my brother and never get an opportunity. My brother had everything going for him, and just let it go. Just threw it away like it was worth nothing.
If you're going through anything, to reach out for help.
Even if you see someone using, like if you're not using, but if you see someone around you, don't be afraid to speak up, because you're saving a life. Ultimately, you're not ratting someone out, you're not being a tattletale.
Don't think it's corny going to a counselor and asking, to talk about something, even if it's as simple as a grade that you're worried about. Those things are important to talk about. And the more you stuff them, the more you're probably going to self-medicate and try to look for other ways to get answers. I drank.
Saturday morning. Let me quickly introduce our panel, and then they'll begin to share from their perspectives. Our first panelist is Somerset County Prosecutor Micheal Robertson. He joined us at a lot of these events. He's the Chief Law Enforcement Officer for Somerset County, and he's going to share, of course, the county's law enforcement perspective of the big picture. Next will be Scott Chertoff. He's an officer with the Bernardsville Police Department, and you may know him as the DARE instructor. Does everybody know what DARE means? He'll tell us later. He's going to share his perspective from being a DARE instructor in the schools. John Cerrato has, I found out, over 30 years of experience as a therapist. He's currently a therapist at High Focus Centers in Branchburg, and he focuses on adolescent chemical dependency. I guess he started that program. Lisa Drew, many of you know her because she's a student assistance counselor in the school district here, and she's going to share, of course, from the perspective of what's going on in the lives of students in school. And Eavan Jenkins will share more of the story that you just saw in the video. They're going to share for a few minutes. We'll do our Q&A, and so write your questions down, save them, and we'll be prepared for that. So, Prosecutor Robertson, tell us how county law enforcement is dealing with these things and what you see in this from your perspective.
So by way of quick background, some of you in the audience I know, I grew up in Bridgewater and then ultimately in Basking Ridge. I'm a 1995 Ridge graduate. I was friends with a lot of kids that went to Bernards High, even though we were back then considered rival high schools. I had two children, a fourth grader and a second grader that attended Oak Street. So in my position as prosecutor, this is what I'm supposed to be doing and I enjoy it, but this is very personal to me, especially in this section of Somerset County because this is my home. Prior to being appointed by the governor to this position, I was an assistant prosecutor in Essex County for several years, and then for 8 years I was assistant United States Attorney at the U.S. Attorney's Office for 8 years from 08 to 16. And during my tenure, both as a state prosecutor and federal prosecutor in Newark, I dealt with some serious stuff, as you can imagine, especially at the U.S. Attorney's Office, organized crime, Russian gangs, things like that. And so when I got put in this post, and I would commute every day from Basking Ridge to down Route 78, I was never ignorant enough to think that my town, my county didn't have a drug problem. Howard was extremely shocked at the magnitude of it, especially right here. So I appreciate all of you coming out. Quite frankly, I wish this room was full, because one of the things I'm really frustrated with when I'm at the ShopRite or the Kings or wherever is that people are really have their heads in the sand about what's going on with their kids and what's going on in the schools and just basically what's going on in this area. Hear what I'm saying, make no mistake, Bernardsville, Basking Ridge, Far Hills, Peapack, Bedminster, Bridgewater, Manville, Somerville, Hillsborough, we're all in the same boat with this. We all have the same problem. Our kids are going through a lot of stress and pressure and anxiety of the likes of which I'm 42, probably some of us, at least are in that age range, we didn't have to deal with. In particular, these things cause an extreme amount of anxiety, and I'm sure John could speak to it more intelligently than me. But I've sat on enough of these panels to figure out that these kids are super stressed out, and that's why they revert to alcohol and drugs. So one of the things that I usually lead off with, and it's funny because I always have to thank my father, even though sometimes I still butt heads with him, which was, I'll never tell anyone in this audience or anywhere I go how to be a parent, right? It's extremely difficult. I find it almost impossible on certain days and feel like I'm sometimes failing. But there was one thing my dad used to tell me all the time when I was at William Manning and at Ridge especially. And it was those times when I pushed him and wanted to go to places or parties where he knew it was not a good place to go. And it was his simple comment, Micheal, I'm your father, I am not your friend. And I say that and I share that with all of you because, not so much now because a fourth grader and second grader, although test me, I'm not at that level where I have to break them down. I just think it's a really relevant comment to be making to all of us right now because what we see trend-wise is there's a lot of parents out there that think they should be their kid's friend and not their parent. And the repercussions of that are what people like Scott and patrolmen throughout the county are seeing in the way of underage drinking or drug abuse. And so I just last week was at Rider University with a young man who shared his story about how, it all started with a red Solo cup. If some of you ever went to Chris Herron's thing, he gave a presentation at Ridge and also at Watchung. He's a former NBA All-Star, and his whole lead-off is it all started with a red Solo cup in my friend's basement. And so this idea that alcohol is not that bad and everyone's doing it, I understand that, but understand that certain people are programmed different ways, and as a result, what may be on its face from the get-go something simple turns into a complete nightmare and could end you up in the criminal justice system. So what I've taken the initiative to do is work with folks like Community Crisis, Health and Human Services in my county, and basically, Tim, Pastor Tim, clergy, anyone I'll collaborate with in an effort to get the message out to the community about what's going on. And again, we're doing everything we can in law enforcement to, prevent this from happening. My partners over at the federal level that I have a good relationship with, we're working with them on the distribution side of the house, which is, this is not a joke, but I kind of make a joke. Jersey's known for our tomatoes, right? Jersey tomatoes. Well, New Jersey's also known throughout the United States for having the purest heroin in the United States because it comes over in the port, Elizabeth and Newark, and it's not cut yet. So Route 78 that many of you may travel, a lot of tractor trailers from California, Midwest, Pittsburgh, come to New Jersey, load up with heroin, and bring it back out to California. So on that front, law enforcement is doing everything we can to combat it. But to be candid, it starts at home. It starts at home with conversations, difficult conversations perhaps, but conversations with your children about what's going on in their lives and not just how's your day, fine. I get that from my fourth grader. I'm like, no, tell me, what'd you do? What'd you learn? And I'm starting it now because I'll be honest with you, again, reverting back to being a parent, not a prosecutor, I am scared for my kids. Just in the last 3 months, Bernards Police administered 13 Narcans. That's a lot for Basking Ridge. It's a small town. Bernardsville is a small town. You guys had, I believe, 5, if my math is correct, the last 2 months. And I've talked to people that live in $10 million houses in the Burnsville Mountains, all the way down to the blue-collar sectors of Manville. There is not a person that I have not spoken with that is affected by this. So I don't care how much you make or don't make, what car you drive, where you live, where you go to school. I guarantee you everyone in this audience knows someone that's been affected by this or themselves is going through something like this. So I would encourage you to speak up about it, talk to your family, talk to your friends, and just, again, for me, it's the simple making you all aware that this problem exists. I'm going to shut up now because I know there's more important people here to talk, but I just want you to know that, again, this is my job, but this is really personal for me because this is my home. I grew up here. My friends live in Burnsville, Basking Ridge, Far Hills, Peapack. So they got kids. Those kids are friends with my kids. So I'll make sure I can do everything I can to protect your kids and your families, but just the mere acknowledgement that it exists needs to be done on your part. And that's the start.
Michael, thank you for all you do to serve the county and for your support for the work that we do in prevention and intervention. Officer Chertoff, you're going to share the DARE program with us. Sure. Tell us all about that.
So my name is Detective Scott Chertoff. I'm with the Bernardsville Police Department. I am entering my 7th year as a police officer here, and I'm entering my 4th year as a DARE officer. And what I can say about the DARE program is I have a very unique opportunity to have the ability to step out of that negative light that seems to surround what is law enforcement. Like if you notice in that video, it starts off with the red and blue lights that nobody ever wants to see. But when I'm in the school, I get to be people's best friend. I get to be a resource for these kids. I get to talk to them about what goes on in their daily life, what goes on at home, and they look at me as someone that can provide guidance and be an overall resource for them. So for the DARE program, it does focus a little bit, or a lot of it, on drugs and alcohol, but more so it focuses on decision making. I talk to these kids daily about making good choices, thinking about the possible consequences for them. Because while I do come into the schools and I am a good guy and I want to be friends with them, I also remind them that I still am a police officer, that we're a 20-man police department, so that means they have a 1 in 20 chance of me showing up when they do something wrong. And I always tell them that I'm the last person that they want to see if they've done something wrong, because I'm going to hold them accountable more so than anybody else because I know them. I think it's incredibly important that not only my department but surrounding agencies develop a relationship with these kids, because we are that last resort. We are the people that will come to help them or will come when they're in trouble. So like I said, I'm incredibly thankful that I have the opportunity to be here with you, and I do see a lot of familiar faces, both current and former DARE students, and the parents of both current and former DARE students. And I applaud you for being here, because this is a very difficult thing to talk about, especially with young kids. So kudos to you for being here.
Can you, while you're there, just tell us a little bit more about what you do with DARE. Thanks.
So to be more specific with DARE, I spent 10 weeks in 6th grade and 7th grade, and we come in, like I said, we talk about making responsible decisions, good choices. We do touch very briefly on the effects of alcohol, the effects of tobacco, and the effects of any drug that might happen in your system. But I don't want to scare them into thinking that just because they see their parents picking up a beer or a glass of wine, that immediately they're alcoholics. We talk about things in moderation and being careful with what we do.
I appreciate you being the positive, no, you can pass it on. We'll get your questions later. I appreciate being the positive face of local law enforcement, right? Because most of the time, we either get to see something glamorized in the movie or something horrible in the movies, or something on the street that's not good. You're in the school with students and teachers and families, and you get to be the positive face of local law enforcement. Thank you. John, tell us what's going on in the world that you live in.
Good evening, everybody. My name is John Cerrato. Basically been in the field 30 years now. Worked at a residential and currently work at High Focus in Branchburg, which we treat adolescent and adult with mental health, dual diagnosis of mental health and substance, both adolescent and adult. I came in with an agenda to talk about, a certain avenue, which direction I wanted to go with tonight. But after seeing that video, it pulled me into 10 different directions. And it's interesting how when that video stopped, there was total silence. And the only thing I can say, and probably what we would hope as a panel together, is that the families of loved ones could walk out of here with this much more insight into what's really going on, which would be a lot more insight than what you may have not had walking in here. First of all, when we talk about mental health, drugs and alcohol are not the problem. They're a symptom of the problem. And to really address it, like I said, at High Focus, we deal with a lot of dual diagnosis, which we call co-occurring, which a lot of the teenagers today, and the prosecutor said it really nicely about social media and what goes on as a main problem today. Most kids today don't even communicate with each other, they just text. So that social development is not even there anymore, for the most part. There's a big epidemic in the state of New Jersey, all over, but Ocean County in the state has the highest overdose rate throughout the United States. And it was one time when I was down there, it was interesting, I put on a radio station, a rock radio station, and every 2 hours, they would broadcast how many overdoses occurred that week and how many were spared through Narcan. That's how bad it is. Main thing that I probably want to get across tonight is how it impacts families. And in High Focus, one of the things that we pride ourselves on is that we are a family-based program where we do believe the solution is within the family. And most families today would have never envisioned that the kids who enter these programs, that when they were born, that 13 years later, 15 years later, 17 years later, 19 years later, they would be inside a substance abuse mental health clinic treating their kid. They would have never envisioned that. And it does tear a family apart. When families come in, they look for answers. They don't know what to do. Parents become split. And it's unique because each family, parents have different parenting styles. The problem when this hits home, it's magnified, and basically the parents become distant and not on the same page. They blame each other. The kid manipulates the system even further. The ones who are really impacted by all of this are the siblings. They don't know what's going on. They see their older sibling, what they're doing. They don't know how to approach it. On one hand, they don't like what's going on. On the other hand, should I tell mom or dad? But if I do, I know my brother or sister will get mad at me. So they're caught right in the middle, not knowing which way to go. 2, they feel slated and pulled to the side because all the attention is on Mary and Johnny trying to get them better. So they're getting negative attention, they're getting positive attention, but the younger siblings are saying, well, what about me? Here I'm doing good, but it seems like everything's evolved around my older brother and sister trying to get them better. Now granted, families will come together to help their kid, but this is just another instant of how it impacts the family. So it's a major issue. Like I said, we do believe the solution is within the family. I would just have to say that awareness is key. Parents need to work together, be aligned, so a united front, be on the same page. You need to talk to your kids if you see different changes of behavior or attitude. You can look at also too that a lot of times families will blame who they're hanging out with. Are they being influenced? But once again, you got to go to the root of the problem as to why the kids are gravitating towards that. Sometimes, kids come from divorced, separated households where the parents don't speak. It's bitter. They're caught in the middle once again. They become the voice of both sides of the parents. And at that time, they look at an escape from that system by looking for their so-called friends as a sub-family that they accept as identification, and unfortunately, it's that type of lifestyle. So even if it's separated or divorce, parents still need to be on the same page. It's very important. And basically, like I said, for family and loved ones, just be aware of what's going on in the household. I'm not saying like to search a kid's room, but a big thing right now too that's coming across the state is the jewels and vaping. That's a big thing in a lot of the schools now. And what happens when they get caught in these schools, basically they get suspended. Sometimes law enforcement comes in to test the device, and automatically they have to go and be tested. Now, if they test positive, they have to go for an assessment, and that's what usually winds them up in a lot of the treatment centers. And all across the board in the state, a lot of the schools are adopting this policy. So, and this all comes from, a lot of the states that have legalized cannabis. And most adolescents today would say, well, this is the direction Jersey's going to anyway. So it's really not that bad, but it is bad. You don't read the statistics in a lot of the states about the negative consequences or the results that happen with these states that do pretty much legalize recreational cannabis. So, it's not a good look. A lot of these vape machines and a lot of, they call these DAT pens, which, are a spin-off of the Juuls, but their pods are pure THC oil, which is like 20 times the concentrate of regular marijuana. And with that, you can only imagine what the effects will be and the effects that it has on the people who use it. So it's very important that everyone just needs to be aware about what's going on and ask questions, seek out your community resources. If your kids do need treatment, go seek out treatment centers. They're there to help. But most important, it's also there to keep the family to be aware, and basically to be aware is to be alive. Thank you.
I like that, to be aware is to be alive. I'm grateful that you came out of retirement 2 years ago to start the Adolescent Chemical Dependency Program at High Focus. I'm sure your other 28 years of experience informed these last couple, and I'm sure the families appreciate you being there for them. Thank you. Lisa, boots on the ground in the school, heels on the ground in the school, whatever. Tell us what's going on from Student Assistance Council perspective.
Well, a lot. I have been working with teenagers for over 20 years. John has me beat, but 10 of which I've been working in Bernardsville. And I thank you for including me in this important conversation. A lot has changed in this district. When I first started working here, it was, we don't have these problems, let's not start talking about them. People will get worried that we have an issue. These problems exist everywhere. Kids are facing an enormous amount of pressure. The anxiety, the mental health issues are rising. My job has changed a lot in the 10 years that I've been working here, and dealing a lot with mental health challenges and how that impacts substance use, substance abuse, alcohol abuse. So I just think that for too long our culture has perpetuated this idea that underage drinking is a rite of passage, everybody does it, and for the most part they're okay at the end. It's still the #1 drug of choice among our adolescents. There's a lot of reasons for that. It's easily accessible. And I also think that our attitudes as a culture really are shaping our young people's behavior and their attitudes. So, these conversations are so important, and I agree with everything that Michael and John and Scott are saying. Conversations early and often are so important. And, I think that if we come together as a community and we show that this is important and we help our kids understand the risk, that there are both, immediate consequences, whether it be social embarrassment. I mean, I really wish I could take the phones away from them because it just adds a whole other layer of pressure for them in their lives. But, those immediate consequences, the fights, the fallout with their peers, the assaults, the accidents, and then, of course, the long-term consequences. And I just think that oftentimes our kids aren't aware that, what they're doing now can very well have a long-term impact on their life, their relationships. Their brains are still developing. So this idea that, a little underage drinking or a binge here and there is not such a big deal, I've heard it all. I've heard, it's under my roof, we've got it under control, at least my kids aren't using drugs. I've heard that one a lot. It is a problem. Underage drinking, when your brain is not fully developed, has a whole slew of problems associated with it. So I would say whatever we can do to try to support them in managing their lives and all that they have on their plate, both their social lives, their academic lives, their athletic lives, whatever we can do, I think will help them in the long run. And, we're seeing a rise in these, not just the mental health issues, but also a lack of resilience and coping skills. We have a tendency to pathologize a lot of normal human experience. And I'm sure everybody in this room has had negative experiences, trying times, situations where they just thought, oh my gosh, I wish I could just, go back in time and take it all back. But our kids are really struggling with how to manage even some of those basic life experiences. And if we can give them the tools, healthy tools, and not turn towards the drugs and alcohol to try to self-regulate, manage emotions, deal with stress, then that's good for all of us, which I think is really important. And I would say the one thing for parents, you're all here because you care and you're seeking guidance and maybe looking for some specific answers, but just stay vigilant. That, I think, is the biggest thing. Know who their friends are. Know their friends' parents' attitudes about drugs and alcohol, because a lot goes down when, you turn your back and, there might be a reason why they really love to go to Johnny's house, because certain things are permitted and overlooked. And that's concerning. Sometimes not even sometimes, every year I get at least one phone call from a parent who is concerned about their child's friend. Either it's their drinking, their drug use, some other concerning behavior, but they don't want their name mentioned. And they don't feel comfortable reaching out to that family. And they may have been friends with that family since grade school. And I just hope that, this is the start of additional conversations, that a community can really come together and say, we don't want this for our children. We don't want them to, turn to these parties on weekends where all sorts of things happen that have consequences at school, consequences academically, socially especially. And I think that if we can support each other as parents, I want to be the parent that my children's parents know if they go to the Drew's house, nothing is happening. And if something does happen, Lisa's going to call me. And I hope that maybe that's something that we could start to turn around in our community. Thank you.
Lisa, thanks for being there in the schools, serving students and families. There, no offense against your school district, I don't know it that well, but there should probably 10 of you. Are there 10 of you? Are there 10 of you? 10 student assistance council?
No, just me. For the district.
So if you're here for the school district, and Eavan, we saw some of your story. Fill in the blanks. Tell parents and students what they need to know.
All right. First, I just want to thank everyone for having me out tonight and to just be considered to be on such a remarkable panel of professionals. And I'm kind of like the bad child, like the don't do this experience. And, for me, I grew up in Roxbury Township, up in Morris County. I come from, really a picture-perfect family. I had both my parents. I had two older brothers. I was the youngest. We were Devils season ticket holders, and we went on great vacations. I was student council president. I was an A+ student. I was in every activity under the sun. And when I was 10 years old, my father died suddenly of a heart attack. And and I say that mainly to refer back to a lot of what John was saying, where something happened and I didn't know how to talk about it. And my mom still had 3 kids to raise, and she was struggling, just to cope with her own heartbreak and trying to take care of us. And I didn't understand what I was going through. I was too young to really narrow in on what I needed to do. And what I needed was to get help, and I needed to talk about it more. And my mom took me to therapy sessions, and I just kind of sat there silently. And later on in my adolescent, when I was, a little rude and snotty, and I would fight with her, she would look back on that time because the therapist had said to her that, this is going to come out in my adolescence. So that's just kind of what she talked up my behavior to. But what was happening was I was hanging out with the wrong crowd, and I started lying about the people I was hanging out with. And, I would hang out at John's house, every weekend, and we'd drink, and I'd go to all these parties, and I felt like a need to fit in, and I found it there. And my grades started to suffer, and I started to suffer. I was in a lot of pain, and all along, my mom just believed me because she didn't really follow up with any parents. She never really felt the need to. She asked me to bring home good grades. I still, was bringing home good enough that she felt it was okay. I called her every time I told her I was arriving somewhere, but she didn't know. She didn't know that I was drunk, and I hid it well. And I went about my life thinking that I was invincible, and that stories like this don't happen to people like me. I had no idea. I sat in assemblies as a youth and heard stories like this, and I had no idea that they could actually happen, or at least happen to people that I know, let alone me. And then shortly after high school, I was out at a party, and me and my friend got in my car, and I was on Route 80. I was going 96 miles per hour in a blackout, and I cut across 3 lanes of traffic, and I dove into the trees, and I came to, and I found him laying across the middle console, and I tried to pick him up and shake him and scream his name, and he didn't respond, and I tried to get out of the car, and that didn't work, and I was taken to the emergency room, and you heard a lot of the story. That police officer came in and told me that I had killed my friend, and I was 19 years old, and I just thought I was out drinking. This is not what I set out to do. And my life has been forever changed because of that decision I made 12 years ago. And, shortly afterwards, I did go to prison, and I spent 4 years in a Mayan Correctional Facility in Clinton, and half of my time was served in maximum security. And, here I was, this 19-year-old girl. I had no idea, and all my other classmates were off in college, and I was off in prison. Those 4 years were spent there instead. And, and just coming from where I came from, it just was unheard of. And it was so embarrassing. And during the time that I was in prison, both my brothers had gotten married. And, all these family events, these things that I missed out on. But, today is my brother's 10-year wedding anniversary, and I was thinking back to the day that they got married, and I remember because it was the same day that I got moved from maximum security to minimum custody, and I was so excited about it, but everyone I knew was at that wedding, and I couldn't call anyone because you couldn't call a cell phone from state prison, so nobody was home to talk to when I was scared in my new facility, and I remember thinking that, and then I remember immediately going to what my next train of thought always is that I took my friend from this world, and it's my brother's 10-year wedding anniversary, and I got to call him today and wish him, you know, congratulations. But like, I took that from my friend forever. He'll never have that opportunity with his siblings. It's just weird to me because we did that video. I think it was 2010, so it's been 8 years since that was filmed, and I was still in prison at the time. And since then, my life has changed so much. But I've gone through so many hurdles because of the car accident. And you know, I was financially liable. There was a civil suit where not only I was sued, but other kids that we were with that night. My mother was sued because the car that I was driving was in her name. And actually, a parent that was part of our friend group was financially liable because she knew that we had drank on many occasions, and they couldn't prove that, you know, she didn't know that night. So, you know, there were many people that became financially liable because of this circumstance. And you know, because of all my hospital bills and treatment and help, I had to file bankruptcy at the age of 24 for not even any credit card debt. You know, like I had nothing. It was just all hospital bills. And you know, and that's still like with me today. And just now, am I probably in the next year going to be finishing college because I've had to go back part-time while I'm working. And to find a job is like impossible as it is, let alone being someone with a criminal record with no education. And, you know, and like the one thing that touched me the most when I heard that is usually just my mom talking, but I didn't even remember saying this, and I haven't seen that video in a long time, and I was talking about how I can't even imagine getting married. And I'm actually getting married in 50 days. And I remember I got engaged a little over a year ago, and that weekend I was so excited, and then all of a sudden it was Sunday, and I was just hanging out around my house, and it just hit me like, how can I do this? And like when I've taken away so much from somebody, from his mom, from his father, from his brother and sister, and then like I have the right to be happy, you know, and like, yeah, you know, I guess I do, but each happiness comes with a consequence. And there's just, you know, there's just so much. You know, I was sharing with somebody before I came up here that I was eating dinner with my fiance the other night, and I referred back to something that happened in prison. And my fiance is a teacher. He like knows no wrong, no evil. He's like been a straight up guy his whole life, and he just looked at me and he's like, "It doesn't even seem like you. Like you just, I can't even imagine that." And it's just so funny to me because my life is so different from like when I did that video, but yet like it's still with me every single day. And I just want to thank you guys again for having me out here and being able to share this panel with you guys.
I was going to let you guys know that even in this setting, it's okay to applaud when somebody says they're getting married in 50 days, right? Eavan, as always, thank you for your transparency. Appreciate it. So this is the time where you get to be part of this important conversation. So hopefully you've been paying attention, but also formulating some questions that you want to ask because you need to know, or maybe you're asking for a friend. Who knows, right? This is important because I'm going to give you some instructions that are going to help you. First, I'm going to walk around with a microphone. It's a big place. I know you have the loudest voice on earth. I actually do, but I still use a microphone. And listen to the other questions, please, because we don't want to repeat questions because we want to get to as many people as possible, and we want you to be listening to the other answers too. So yes, hold on to your question tightly, but listen to the other questions. Keep your question as clear and concise as possible so that we can move on. If you have a personal story to share, you can do that afterwards with one of our panelists or us. We're around after that. after the session tonight, and we'll be happy to talk with you at the tables. There'll be people outside at the tables. So, I'm going to ask you to do this because I'm not going to climb through over people's laps to the center. A lot of you on the ends. If you have a question, just move to the center aisle and stand up, and I'll take them in the order that I see them. And if you're able to direct your question, particularly to the one with the panelists, that's fine. If you just have a general question, that's okay too. And I'll direct the question as we need to. So, who's first? See, that's good. I didn't have to prime the pump. I appreciate that. And this is where I get my exercise. Oh.
I want to thank you all for being here and especially for being so candid. And I just want to know, have our kids seen this video and heard this presentation? Because I think there's nothing more impactful to them than hearing it firsthand and seeing it. You know, when your parents tell you something, you just tend to tune them out. You don't listen to them. But I think if they see this and it's sort of mandatory for them to see it in school, it might have a really big impact.
So, student assistance counselor, where are we in this?
Our goal was to get as many kids out here with their parents so that not only could they see the video and hear the comments, but, you know, to help families have conversations with their kids. I mentioned that it's important to have conversations early and often. One of probably the most important conversations to have with your children, you know, they're all at risk to a degree, but some kids are at a higher risk, particularly if there are some health issues, mental health issues, substance abuse issues within the family. And I always find that a lot of families don't share that with their children, sometimes not until after something has happened. So, you know, I think having those conversations with your kids is really important. Let them know so that they can make an educated decision. You know, that they are at higher risk if they make a choice to start binge drinking at parties. But to directly answer your question, our kids have not seen it unless they're in this audience, and perhaps that's something that we can explore bringing it to the school.
Well, and a good way that they could see it is you can find this online. You go to the table in the back, Safe Coalition, you can find it online and use it, talk about it at home. It's always good to talk at home. Matter of fact, in Hillsborough and in Somerville next month, we have what we're calling Night of Conversation. Similar to this, except there's not a long Q&A like we're going to have tonight. We sit people around tables with a student who's trained to facilitate, and then we give you some questions to discuss, like you're at home at the dinner table, or like we used to be at home at the dinner table, right? So those are a couple other options. So,
Hey, Tim?
Yes.
30 seconds.
Yeah.
It's related to your question. So I meet monthly with the superintendents for the county. And one of the big things that I've been trying to push, again, going back to that theme of collaboration, is getting curriculum in the schools, especially starting in middle schools. I use the word mental wellness, mental health, because ultimately, as John pointed out, that's where all this stuff starts, is with their mental wellness. And I will tell you universally, most of the superintendents are like, yay, thumbs up. But the pushback or the fault argument on their part is they don't know how to fit it into the school's curriculum. And so my response always is, it's kind of candid and just direct and like, figure it out. Because quite frankly, that should be all of your number one priority. And they do agree, but again, I would encourage everyone in here, like, either through your board of eds or your PTOs, to start pushing that agenda. The agenda of fit this into their curriculum. Sorry, that's all I was.
No, that's good. And I was a school administrator in Philadelphia, and it is hard. You know, we got to get reading, writing, arithmetic in, and every year we had some new thing, new slant. So if they understand as parents that this is important to you, they know it's important. They'll try to figure it out. So thanks for meeting. Sir, what's your question? Go ahead.
I'll try. Before I have a question, I would like to thank everybody up on the panel. It's an unbelievable presentation, very moving. Eavan, thank you so much for sharing your story and your passion. I hope that, and my question is to Lisa in a second, but I do hope that there's some way we can bring you into the district and speak to our kids, because I think you speak in a way that may reach them. I'm an educator for 43 years, and I just keep wondering, how do we reach these kids? And feel like you have something different that you can offer to our kids. So, like Lisa, my question is for you. Is there anything, as a member of the Board of Education, is there anything else that there are that you can just share with us, some things that we can be doing to provide for you that can do something for this situation to make it a little bit better? And lastly, before you answer that, I want to thank everybody who's responsible for putting this program on, especially Mary Ann and Sam. Thank you very much.
Thank you for asking. You know, last year our previous superintendent had asked me to do an assessment of all of the prevention activities and what exactly was contained in our curriculum to address some of these needs. And we actually are doing quite a bit. Mental health, substance abuse is woven throughout the curriculum from middle school, throughout high school. We have the BOTVIN Life Skills program. There's a lot going on, but I agree that we could always do more. Next year, there's a plan to bring in a suicide prevention program that will be delivered in the life skills classes at the high school level to try to give the kids the tools to recognize some warning signs and symptoms and when to, you know, bring their concerns to a professional. But of course, we could always be doing more. I think that we also could benefit from just more counseling support at our middle school in particular. I'm so happy that many of our middle school parents came out tonight because when I talk with high school students and when I worked with adults, almost all of them said that they recognize some health issues in middle school. Middle school is always seems like the first time that they start to have this inclination that, oh, maybe this is more than just being nervous, or should I always feel sad? You know, and they want to dismiss it right away. A lot of young kids aren't, you know, as Eavan mentioned, ready to talk about those challenges. So whatever we can do to normalize these behaviors, let them know that it's okay to talk about them. Tim Halick, I know, does a wonderful unit on wellness, but he would tell you, I'm sure if he was here, that he'd love to spend more time, you know, talking about specific illnesses and, you know, warning signs. And I used to go into his classroom to do to kind of supplement what he was doing, but it's happening in our district. We could do more, and of course, more counseling support I think would be really helpful.
Yeah, I'm on the Borough Safe Committee in Hillsborough, the Suicide Prevention Committee at the high school. So if you need anything, call me. You have a question?
Hi, I am new to the area. I'm actually from Bedminster, but I'm originally from Jersey City. Love the area. Awesome. I have a high schooler and a middle schooler, and I wanted to know who the actual umbrella is for programs that are running in this area here. Because I saw in Empowerment Somerset, there's a few programs that are offered, but I don't know if they're actually in school. And then that's my first question, and then I wanted to know what you think is the most effective thing to de-stress the kids and what we can do in schools.
We can give you a list of hundreds of programs, right? Not just you know, inpatient but there's all sorts of things. But could you talk about let's let our counterpart therapist talk a little bit about programs that you know of in the area that are supported not just for students who are, you know, chemically dependent already, but maybe we can give some support to families and parents. Okay, so I'll just answer this. Okay? We collaborate all the time with many agencies. Each township has their own social service programs, prevention programs, plus nonprofit agencies like I direct and belong to. So we've got partnerships all over the room, right, everybody? I mean, the tables outside. So one big umbrella, probably not. A lot of people who care and are doing things in this area, yes. So what other, what can we think? This is
the stress question.
A giant question.
It is.
We need a giant stress ball, I guess.
Right. Well, I think, you know, coming out to more of these programs, learning about how to support your students. I believe the HSA and their parent talk on November 29th will talk about ways to help your kids with stress. But I think that we have this notion too that we want to eliminate stress for our kids, that we want to shield them from it, that it's just all too much and everybody's overwhelmed and let's just find ways to cut things off our plate. And I guess in some respects, particularly when I look at the rigorous course loads that a lot of our high school students are taking, I really do wish they could maybe better manage or take some things off their plates. But some stress is okay and it's needed, it's necessary. It motivates us, it helps us focus, it energizes us to get prepared for the test, for whatever situation that's come our way that's challenging. So we don't want to eliminate stress, but we do want to recognize when stress has now spilled over and started creating deficits in our lives. When is it now becoming unhealthy? How do we recognize that our son or daughter is struggling to manage? Do they just need some strategies and tools? Do they need to add more balance to our lives? A lot of students have, it's all work and no play. The demands that they put on themselves, they are working from morning until late at night, and it's a lot. And I don't know that that's so healthy. In fact, I know that it's not healthy. And yet, for students who are choosing to follow that path, we want to just help them manage it better as best as we can, but not eliminate it, if that makes sense. And I think it's different for everybody. Whether it's finding ways to relax, it's finding ways to make it okay to have downtime. And honestly, like some of our students who are struggling with mental health challenges, busying themselves with a lot of things, although it causes stress, it also distracts their mind from what's really troubling them. So I think we always circle back to recognizing, is this normal stress for the given situation, or could it mean something else? And I think then the direction you take is different too.
John, 30 years of serving individuals and families. Can you give us some perspective on that too? How can we shape this whole stress, no stress thing? Any recommendations? I'm not putting you on the spot or anything.
No, you're not.
Yeah.
No. I think it's so important that families on a weekly basis interact together and do something together as a family. Some way or another, a lot of the kids who come into the program, that's kind of lost. Because sometimes families are pulled into different directions. Maybe one parent works a lot, leaving one parent to do everything, a lot of stress in the household. And that concept of even sitting down together as a family or doing some activities on a family on a weekly basis is so important to that family link, that the foundation of family, being able to communicate, being able to sit down and talk. Like I said, finding some good quality time together, going away, doing certain things together. It doesn't have to be expensive, but that family component of doing things with each other and, like I said, interacting with each other and socializing within the family, it's so instrumental. You don't know how many kids voiced that in their family sessions of missing out while we were younger. I remember when we did this, or we went away and we did this. We don't even do that no more. So I think that's a key component.
Thank you. I knew you had some.
The next logical question is, in talking about making sure that they have skills and coping mechanisms, when you've identified that your child has kind of gone by what family time and coping skills, things like mindfulness and meditation apps just aren't going to cut it. I've talked to a lot of people who feel like their kids are struggling and they don't know where to start in terms of where to find counseling, where to find them the appropriate help that they need. And I think that then by the time you get to late middle school, high school, your kids may be looking to self-medicate. So in the interim, when you're recognizing that maybe your kid's stress level is too high, the things you're doing at home, maybe the things that they're getting at school aren't enough. How do you find the resources that you need as a family?
That's a key question. Thank you. Who wants to feel that way?
Call me.
Yeah, call any of us, right?
Yeah, but I have many different kinds of resources at my disposal, and a lot of times parents will call and they'll say, here's what I'm seeing, here's what we're experiencing, and I'll share with them based on what they're telling me, whether I think, it warrants, pulling the student in, talking to them a little bit more about what's going on, making an immediate referral to a counseling agency or an individual clinician. And sometimes when families call, it's not as dire, and it doesn't require, an immediate assessment or anything like that. It's just everybody, let's just take a look at this logically. Once I can sometimes speak with a student, help them calm down with some of that mindfulness, some of those basic, just a quiet space to decompress, then they're able to do their own natural problem solving, but when they get in the height of stress and they get nervous, they may lose sight of that, and I think sometimes that spills over into the families too. So I would just say, just call me, call someone in your, the counseling department. Let them be aware that your child is struggling also, so that, we can reach out to them if it's appropriate and offer them some support. There are plenty of students that will just pop in a couple of times a year. They'll say, Ms. Drew, I don't want to talk, I just need to sit. Can we just do some breathing? I just need a quiet space. There's no downtime with these cell phones and social media.
Right.
They're not going home and having some, whether it be family time or just some quiet time, some downtime, everything is immediate, constant feedback. A lot of times it's negative. Those things really do add to their stress. So I would also say limiting, if you can, that social media use.
Let me also encourage you, if you have a house of worship, community of faith, plug in there deeper. Sometimes we think that as kids get older, they don't need it. I think that's when they need it more. That's when I need it. And Pioneer Family Success Center table, call us. We can connect you to anything in the county, literally. And so there's resources everywhere. You have community crisis in this area. So there's a lot of local resources too. Another question.
It's a two-parter, one for law enforcement and one for Eavan. In terms of parents who serve minors in their home for alcohol, how seriously does law enforcement take that? If it's reported, do you enforce the law? And what is the law, if you can explain that? And for Eavan, since you personally experienced that, and you said, there's always that home that the parents are allowing these things to happen with underage drinking, if you could talk personally why that is obviously negative.
Let's do law enforcement first. Let's do the questions in order.
It's treated very seriously, is the short answer. I mean, I've gotten into, I'll call them conversations, not debates, with parents about that very fact. And I say, I'm not going to get into a moral argument with you because I'm just going to rely on the legal argument. It is illegal to serve minors, end of story, period. And then I follow up with, if you think that you have control over teenagers in your basement, and you believe that, I have a bridge to sell you in Brooklyn. Oh, and P.S., by the way, you think that's the only place they go and party, like your basement? I was in high school, went to Ridge, I was considered a jock. We found places. I mean, I'm not joking, but I'm like, make them work for it. Don't give it to them. Don't set up your house as the place for the debate. And you can ask any insurance carrier in the United States, obviously including New Jersey, there is not one insurance carrier that will cover you when you get sued for an incident that occurs in your house. And I've seen it happen. Prior to becoming a prosecutor, in civil litigation, and people lose these $1 million homes over being a cool parent. I hope it's worth it to you. But to answer your question, and I'm sure Scott, and I see Chief Valentine's here, yeah, we treat it seriously. And under the law, if we have probable cause to believe that there's illegal activities going in the house, he calls one of my APs, we get a search warrant, we go in your house. And there's no defense. A lot of parents are like, I didn't know what was going on. It's called willful blindness. It's not a defense. It won't work. So we treat it seriously.
We do have brochures outside called Parents Who Host Lose the Most, and it gives you information. Eavan. Quick, grab her the mic. Oh, sorry. We have two.
So to know my mom is to know that she is completely against underage drinking, and she was at the time and still is today. And when she found out the extent of which that I was drinking, and when she found out that there were other parents, people that she sat at basketball games with and softball games, and had no idea, she was devastated. She lost friendships over it, you know, and to me, like, yeah, as a kid, we all thought that was the cool parent. But, you know, as I've grown up, I've come to realize that, and after my circumstance, that, you know, they were just enabling us to do something that wasn't legal. And obviously, you know, there's a legal age for a reason to drink. And, you know, I was not armed with the tools to be able to drink at the age of 16, 17, 15, you know, and the idea that, you know, my mom was just absolutely beside herself to find out that people she was friends with were serving her daughter liquor when she is adamantly against it. So, you know, I guess my advice would be definitely have conversations. You know, she trusted that I was sleeping over someone's house because she knew the other parent, but she didn't know that parent was doing this, and nor would they tell her. You know, and I would make sure to have those conversations.
Yeah, my kids always hated when I said, "I haven't met the parent of your friend yet, so no." Okay, this one, and then this will be the last question back.
I do want to thank everybody. I almost didn't come tonight, and it was because I was tired. I was working, whatever. And then, you know, my daughter said, "Are we going?" I went, "Yes, let's go. So let's get out here and go." So I'm so glad we came. This has been very powerful. And Eavan, I'm so glad you're getting married. I just wish you every little piece of happiness as you move forward with your life. I'm sure it has been a struggle, and I admire your strength. I have a question about heroin and fentanyl. I watched this amazing show on Nova last week, and it really scared me. And to think, when you guys gave that introduction about it's here, it's in Bernardsville, it's in Berners Township. Could you give us an idea of how much is it here? Is it heroin? Is it fentanyl, which is even worse than heroin? Could you just talk about that a little bit? Because I know the alcohol is a big topic, but I'm a little nervous about that also.
One of our law enforcement?
I mean, I'll start it off. It is here, and I think in any capacity that being here is bad. If it's one, it's bad. We don't want it here. As far as the combination of heroin and fentanyl, I don't have any specifics on that right now in Bernardsville, but we do encounter it, and we treat every incident with heroin as if there is fentanyl there, because we could just never know without having a lab test it. We don't have the ability to tell whether it's here or not until it goes down to New Jersey State Police Lab to be confirmed.
To segue from what Scott was saying, we're keeping track of the heroin and or any narcotic that is laced with fentanyl, which, by the way, because it hasn't popped up yet, but you know, we were talking about, I think John or Lisa mentioned the vape pens. The THC now, they're putting fentanyl in. So when kids are like, "Oh, mom and dad, it's going to be legal," or whatever, I don't know where they're buying it from, but be advised, it could have fentanyl. And there's this other drug called carfentanil, which is even more powerful than fentanyl. And basically, a pin drop of this stuff will kill you. And as you heard me mention about Narcan reversals, it's like a nasal spray if you've never seen it, but it reverses the effect of an opioid overdose. The Narcan won't work if the heroin or the narcotic is laced with fentanyl or carfentanil. The person's going to die, basically. So it's here. It's manufactured in China. The federal government has put a ban on it, but like any black market, it'll make its way into the United States. So the New Jersey State Police, along with local law enforcement, when we seize a narcotic like that, it is sent to the New Jersey State Police Lab, and we're trying to keep track of trends. John mentioned, for instance, Ocean County. Ocean County is ground zero for this epidemic. They lose 2 people a day. 2 people a day die in Ocean County, New Jersey. Think about that. Probably many of us go to the shore down there in the summers. Ocean County, 2 people die a day from heroin. So, you know, again, like I mentioned earlier, we're trying to do everything we can to combat the importation and crack down on the distribution of it, but yeah, be advised, it's here.
Last question.
Can I just, 1 second? I'm sorry.
Of course.
Very important also for everybody. Today, opiates, painkillers, Percocets, oxycodone, Oxycontin, they're the gateway to heroin now. And a lot of the kids that would come into our program would say, you know what, a lot of families don't lock it up. So what we'd say, hey, Mr. and Mrs., can we go use your bathroom? And then at that point, they would go into the medicine cabinet, they would see it unlocked, take it, and that's how a lot of the adolescents were getting opioid medications. Because even though they put restrictions on it now, which is another story that's kind of backfiring because a lot of people go into the black market to get it. But just be aware, if you ever prescribe these medications, lock it up.
Even realtors know that when they do house showings, people will come to the showings to check out people's medicine cabinets. So we try to lock those up too.
I just want to let everyone know also that we talk about parent programs. On November 14th, there will be another film being shown for parents called If They Had Known. And it's a really impactful movie. And your freshmen have all seen it. And it deals with, you know, mixing that combination of pills and alcohol and its deadly effects. So come out and see the film.
Mark it on your calendars. I know you'll have cell phones.
So thank you to the panel. I wanted to say Ava's piece is so important because I think youth don't know what they don't know. They think they're invincible. You hear a lot of everybody does or nobody does, but you're so relatable, and I think that they can take a lot from that, so thank you. The comment was made a couple times about it all started with a solo cup, and I kind of feel like these days it all starts with a Juul because it feels like that's even younger. And one of the questions I've had is, why can the kids get pods at any age in local convenience stores?
We know who's going to feel that. One of you two, right? Our local law enforcement or county. Are those legal? Did you get the question?
Yeah, I mean, it runs the gamut between other people buy them for them, whether it be older siblings, their peers. You know, there's even mailings, you know, that the kids can get, and you know, a lot of times they'll have the packages delivered to a friend's house whose parent isn't home after school. I mean, they're very savvy at getting the things that they want.
Good. See you after, please. Yeah. Don't forget while we're talking about, good reminder, thank you. We have cards in the back about the DEA take-back days and drop-off locations in Somerset County where you can take your medication unused or old and drop it off legally, get rid of it, and it's gone. Don't just try to flush it down your toilet or don't throw it in your garbage. Take it to one of these take-back days. They get thousands of pounds every year. Your township, by the way, is doing some great things, and so some of the people up here can talk to that. So she'd be somebody, if you don't know, stand up and introduce you. Say hi.
Hi everyone, my name is Eavan Jenkins Young Adult, Bernardsville Township Health Department.
So, along with the school district, you guys are really doing some great things in your area. Please take advantage of the events and programs. You just heard the announcement, November 14th, another opportunity to learn. So that's great. Take advantage of that. And talk with your children. You heard that. Talk with your children. I'm so grateful that my sons are married. They're 23 and 28. I have a great 17-month-old grandson. You can see his pictures later out there. They still talk to me. They didn't for a couple of years, you know, they were teenagers, but they talk to me like I'm intelligent now. I'm like, I might know what I'm talking about. So talk, and children, talk with your parents. My dad was an alcoholic. There was no talking like that in our home. I'm just over 36 plus years sober myself. And so talk to your parents, children. Find somebody to help you do that. I say this at nearly every town hall we conduct, and so if you've heard this before, I hope it's sinking in. My hope is, our hope is that tonight you received a lot of information so that you're more educated than you were an hour and a half ago. But I also hope that you receive some inspiration, because the combination of those two, education, right, information, and inspiration, will lead to transformation. First, some personal transformation, then some transformation in your family, then some transformation on your block, maybe your town, maybe the state. Let's think big, right? So we need the combination of those two things, and that's why we have different types of people on this panel. We're going to ask you to go to the slide of, if you have your phone on you, we're going to ask you to do, as we're preparing to do our little drawings. We have some drawings, so take out your little blue tickets, right? We're wrapping this up. We'll have an opportunity if you need to chat with some of the folks. Is everybody able to stick around a few minutes? Great. So we'll be in the back. There's some tables in the back for you to see also. But before we get to the door prizes, please complete either the evaluation on the tiny URL, tomorrow on the school district website, the one right next to the URL there. It's not on the school district website until tomorrow, but you can go on there and pull up the same evaluation. And maybe you need to do that on your laptop or home computer. That's okay. We just ask you to do this because it helps us develop future programs in your area and around the county. We know what people, we need to know what you need to know. We're embroiled in this all the time, so we need fresh ideas, and we want you to do that. You can do it on your phone, great, while we're talking. Of course, we're grateful to all the organizations. You see their